The biggest mistake that I made when it came to robotically affirming was not that I wasn't persisting enough, and not even that I had tendencies to sometimes spiral. The biggest mistake that I made when it came to properly using robotic affirmations was using robotic affirmations as a way of trying to change my physical reality rather than myself and my state of being. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Danielle Desautelle, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the biggest mistake that I made when it came to properly using robotic affirming. Now, obviously I gave away the answer at the beginning of the video, but I want to talk a little bit more of what I mean by this and how I personally accidentally used robotic affirmations in an unproductive way. Now, obviously we know as conscious creators that we are never changing our 3D reality. We are only ever changing ourselves. However, with that being said, sometimes, especially in given moments or given circumstances that are seemingly very triggering, in that moment, sometimes this is not always the easiest thing to remember or apply in those given circumstances, especially when you have high levels of unfavorable states, or if you're reacting to this situation or circumstance in an unfavorable way. And so earlier on in my manifestation journey, I talk about this a lot on my channel, but I went through a big phase of robotic affirming, where the way that I would primarily manifest was I would consciously focus on changing my thoughts and repeating and persisting in those new thoughts that implied that I already had my end result. One of my biggest manifestations that I got using robotic affirmations was actually my $1,000 per day manifestation, where I used the robotic affirmations. I'm a successful person. I'm one of those quietly wealthy people. I make $1,000 per day. I would repeat variations of those affirmations over and over, and I persisted in those affirmations until I saw that reflection in my physical reality. However, looking back at my experience with that manifestation, I had a lot of resistance to manifesting that kind of money into my life at the time. And so what it felt like I was doing as I was persisting in those affirmations was basically persisting while driving with my foot on the brake. That's kind of what it felt like. I came up against a lot of resistance. I came up against a lot of self-doubt, a lot of insecurities, and just a lot of stress and resistance to this reality. But despite all that resistance, despite all of the anxiety, and despite all the fears that came up, I still kept persisting in those affirmations. Looking back at this experience though, if I could go back and tell myself how to properly persist in this kind of manifestation and with robotic affirming, this is what I would tell my past self. And that is, use robotic affirmations to change yourself, and more specifically your state and your focus, rather than trying to change something in your physical reality. Here's the thing when it comes to reality creation. We are never changing anything in our physical reality. We're only ever changing ourselves. And when we change ourselves, that's when the reflection happens in our physical reality, because reality is just a projection of ourselves. Like I said though, when we are in these highly triggering circumstances, or if we have a lot of fear or resistance against our manifestation or with our manifestation, what this can cause us to do is to use robotic affirming, or any type of manifestation method for that matter, to try and change your physical reality rather than try and change yourself. So what this looked like for me with that manifestation, with the $1,000 per day manifestation, was when I was persisting, yes, I was focused on changing myself, but a lot of times it was out of a reaction based, it was more out of a fear-based response to my physical reality. And so what it felt like in those moments when I was persisting was, so let's say I was persisting in, I make $1,000 per day, I make $1,000 per day, I make $1,000 per day. I was persisting in that affirmation, but what I started off doing, and something that I wasn't fully aware of at the time when I was persisting in this way, was the fact that I was using this affirmation to try and get something in my physical reality and try and change my physical reality in some way. Every time I would affirm, I make $1,000 per day, I make $1,000 per day, I make $1,000 per day. Every time I would persist in that, I would be saying it almost as an attack on my 3D reality, or a way of trying to change my 3D reality. Although I was persisting with my mind, I was almost using my mind to try and change my physical reality. I make $1,000 per day, I make $1,000 per day, I make $1,000 per day. I was trying to use my mind, I was trying to use the robotic affirmation to see physical results in my 3D reality. Now, obviously when it comes to manifesting, the whole point of manifesting is to materialize what we want in physical reality. I totally get that. And I don't even think that's a bad thing to actually aim for when it comes to learning how to manifest. However, the important thing to always remember when it comes to manifesting is that reality is a projection of you. the way you change your physical reality is by changing yourself. And more specifically, your state of consciousness, and you want to be changing you to the version of you who already has your manifestation. And so when it comes to robotic affirming, if you have a manifestation that is causing high levels of insecurity or stress, you may be really good at having that reaction trigger you back to persisting in your end result. But a key switch you want to also be aware of is when you use that experience or that circumstance to go back to you and persist in that end result with that robotic affirmation, what you want to do is you want to use the robotic affirmation to chill yourself out, not change your physical circumstances. As we know, circumstances are irrelevant. Circumstances do not matter, only state of being matters. And that is a Bashar quote if you are curious. So if you are being triggered by your physical reality, yes, use that to point the finger back at yourself to persist in your end result, but more specifically, use that experience and your persisting to change your state. Now, how do we do this, and how do we do this with robotic affirming specifically? I talk a lot about this in my other robotic affirmations videos. I'll link them above if you are curious to watch them, but essentially the way you do this is you first remind yourself of the robotic affirmation that you are persisting in. So again, let's say you want to manifest $1,000 per day. Remind yourself, oh yeah, like this circumstance doesn't matter. I'm going to persist in my end result of I make $1,000 per day. But instead of using the robotic affirmation to try and change your 3D reality, which would look something like panic affirming, like I make $1,000 per day, I make $1,000 per day, I make $1,000 per day, where you're like affirming and you're looking for evidence while you're simultaneously affirming because you're trying to use the robotic affirmation to change your 3D reality. Instead of doing that, use the robotic affirmation to control your state of being. And this is the way to do it. This is by far the most productive way to do it, in my opinion. You don't need to get to extremely high levels of happiness or joy or like excitement or even just enjoyment of like the state of the wish fulfilled, like, oh, I have my manifestation. All you have to do is affirm to neutrality. The thing about robotic affirmations that a lot of people are not aware of is that they are actually a form of autosuggestion. I would highly recommend checking out Emil Quay's book on autosuggestion. I will link the link below in the description if you are curious to read it. But essentially, when you are robotically affirming, what you're doing is, like I said, you're practicing a form of autosuggestion. And essentially what autosuggestion is a form of self-hypnosis, where the repetitive nature of the robotic affirmation or the autosuggestion is the very thing that calms your conscious mind, moves it out of the way, and more effectively saturates your subconscious mind because of that repetitive and almost, we could say, like numbing nature of a robotic affirmation or autosuggestion. So this is what it looks like for robotic affirmations. Like I said, instead of panic affirming or affirming to change your 3D reality, like I make $1,000 per day, I make $1,000 per day, I make $1,000 per day. Instead of doing that, use the robotic affirmation to change your state like this. I make $1,000 per day, 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 I make $1,000 per day. What you're doing here is you're taking your state of I do not have my manifestation to I have my manifestation, this level of neutrality. Like I said, you do not need to get to high levels of excitement or joy or, pleasure in order to manifest what it is that you want. A lot of people associate the state of the wish fulfilled with like extreme pleasure and joy and excitement. And those are like fantastic emotions if you can get to that level. But if you are someone who has high levels of resistance to your manifestation, aim for neutrality only and use the repetitive nature of robotic affirming to get yourself to neutrality. Like I said, that repetitive nature is the very thing that almost like numbs you out and gets your state back to a stable level of neutrality. I make $1,000 per day. 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 Duh, I make $1,000 per day. Like the most obvious thing in the world. Like that's where you want to get. You want to get to the level of neutrality. And then when you get yourself to that level of neutrality, what you can then do is put the affirmation down and go live as if. Because the version of you who makes $1,000 per day does not affirm 24/7 that they make $1,000 per day. They just know that they make $1,000 per day. It's pretty normal and natural. And they may remember that they make $1,000 per day every once in a while as they're experiencing their day, but they're not sitting there repeating, I make $1,000 per day every single present moment of their existence. The idea here when it comes to this use of robotic affirmations is to control not only your focus and your imagination with the string of words that you're saying, but also to control your state. I make $1,000 per day. 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 As you're affirming this, you're literally controlling your imagination and your state of being. When you learn how to properly control your imagination and your state, that's when you're actually going to start to see faster reflection of the favorable thing that you want in your 3D reality. Because reality is a projection of our state of consciousness. When you can start controlling your alignment to your manifestation in this way, like I said, this is when you're going to actually start to see more favorable reflection in your physical reality. So the main point I want to make when it comes to this video and how to properly use robotic affirming is making sure that you are using your robotic affirmations to change yourself, not your 3D reality. The way you're changing yourself is you're changing your focus and where you're putting your imagination with the string of words that you are saying and your state of being by affirming to neutrality and getting to a more stable level of neutrality. This stable level of neutrality is the state of having. And yes, maybe the state of having is also being grateful for your manifestation, or happy that you have your manifestation, or joyful that you have your manifestation. By all means, if you can get to those higher levels, go for it, but they are not required when it comes to manifesting what it is that you want. So the main takeaway I want to leave you with when it comes to this video is that when you are using your robotic affirmations, make sure that you're using them not to change your 3D reality, but rather to change yourself. Change the direction and your focus where you're putting your imagination, and also to change your state of being back to the level of neutrality. Use the robotic affirmation to not only change your focus of your imagination, but to get yourself back up to that level of neutrality, which is the state of having. All right. But with all that being said, I'm going to end the video here. Definitely let me know what you think about it in the comments below. As always, I love hearing everyone's different perspectives, but that's all for now. Until next time, keep creating, everyone, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.